Are you tired of having the same old houseplant care advice that just doesn't seem to work for you? Well, you're not alone. In fact, there are 7 common houseplant care rules that you might actually need to break in order to help your plants thrive. Give your plant only indirect sun and never put it in a sunny spot in your home. You would have heard this advice countless times, but in lots of cases, you can and should break this rule. There are lots of plants that benefit from being put in a bright sunny spot. It would actually harm them to put them in indirect light only. The jade plant is the absolute classic example of this. I can't tell you the amount of times I've read the tag on these plants in the big box stores, and it's told me to keep this plant out of direct sun. This is bad advice, plain and simple. This plant needs full sun to thrive. It's a succulent that is native to the sandy slopes and open fields of South Africa. Deprive it of the light it wants and needs, and you'll have a plant that is not growing to its full potential. Other plants, such as those in the ficus family, enjoy a few hours of direct sun each day. They'll do fine in indirect light, sure, but to get the best out of them, I find that a few hours of morning sun is really beneficial. They develop new leaves at a much faster pace this way. Even the Monstera deliciosa benefits from some direct sun. One of mine is living on my west-facing living room where it gets about 6 hours of afternoon sun a day, and its fenestrations and perforations are really developing nice and strong. Here's a disclaimer: don't plonk your plant in front of a south-facing window, forget about it, and expect it not to die. If you are considering moving a plant to a sunnier spot in your home, then please do some research on that specific plant first and consider your own climate. If you live in sunny San Diego, then you'll need to be a bit more careful than me living in rainy Sheffield. You don't want to make a costly mistake. You've probably been told countless times to repot your plant as soon as you get it home from the garden centre. You might have been following this advice and repotting every plant you bring home. This is a rule you should break to save your own sanity and a few pennies in the process. Not every plant we bring home needs to be repotted as a matter of course. In fact, I would say that 95% of the time you should leave your plant in the soil and pot it is in and place it somewhere in your home without worrying. I can't speak for every nursery or big box store out there, but generally, the growers do a pretty good job of putting plants in a medium that is suitable for them. There is also usually a high enough rate of sale for the plant to not become so root bound that it desperately needs uppotting. Basically, it shouldn't be sitting on the shelf for so long that it turns into a mess. The soil will be sufficient for the plant, and even if the plant is a little snug in its pot, should be fine for the first season in your home. Blindly changing the pot and soil might actually do more harm than good. Plants are sensitive souls and they become accustomed to their surroundings. Too much change at once and they tend to throw their dummy out of the pram. They've already experienced that homesick feeling in the change of environment from the shop to your home, so do them a favour and leave them be in their pot. It's the one familiar thing they've got left at this point. The general advice out there is to water your plants less often in the winter. This is advice you'd have heard on this channel before, but it's one I'm actually going to allow you to break. Yep, you heard that right. You can break this rule and you won't receive a detention. Before you call me a hypocrite and turn off your phone in disgust, hear me out. You see, this rule is entirely dependent on your environment in your home. If you live in a climate that gets cold winters and much shorter days, and you don't have the central heating on for more than a few hours a day, then yes, you will need to water your plants less often than in the summer. The plant will not be using as much energy to grow, so the pot won't dry out as quickly as during the growing season. The cooler air temperatures also reduce evaporation from the soil. If, however, you're lucky and your winters are warmer and the days not significantly shorter than in the summer, you might need to water at pretty much the same rate as during the summer. Having plants under grow lights during the winter will also increase the watering requirement. Plants will happily grow under the lights as if it's summer, and it will need water to support that growth. I always say this on this channel, but the best thing you can do for your plants is to always check the soil before watering. I use a moisture meter because I find this is the most reliable measure of soil moisture, and it eliminates the risk of over or under watering my plants. And you'll find a link to the one I use in my Amazon store that is linked below. One of the biggest fears most plant parents face is pulling their plant out of their plastic nursery pot and discovering a root-bound plant. This sends shivers down their spine and they usually run off and repot it straight away. I get it. We've all been indoctrinated to believe that plants hate being pot bound, and having them cooped up will result in their downfall. Well, my plant friends, this is a rule you can almost always break, and your beloved plants will be fine, I promise. In fact, some plants prefer to have a snug pot and will actually thrive in these conditions. The ever popular Monstera deliciosa likes to have a snug, cozy home to live in. Have you ever repotted a Monstera into a larger pot and watched it suffer for a few weeks? Maybe it threw out a couple of yellow leaves. This is the plant telling you to leave it alone. The key thing to remember is that having a root-bound plant is not necessarily going to kill it. As long as you're giving it enough nutrients through fertilizer and watering it as much as it needs, it can live in that state for much longer than you might think. By all means, check your plants, especially in spring, but if the plant is only a little root-bound, then leave it. Focus on the plants that really need the extra space. This saves you a ton of time and money from not constantly repotting your plants that don't necessarily need it. Fancy potting mixes containing sand, soil, perlite, pumice, tone and bark are becoming all the craze in the plant world, but frankly, this is one rule I break all the time. As we get more experienced in plant care, we understand the importance of good, free-draining soil to combat the evils of root rot from overwatering. Keeping your plant in a mix that is light and airy will allow excess water to freely drain and for the mix to dry out quicker, keeping roots safe from soggy soil. Bark, in particular, is seen as a crucial ingredient, especially for succulents and cacti, but in my opinion, it's not really necessary to include bark in your soil mix. It seems companies are selling pre-made potting mixes containing a long list of fancy ingredients in the hopes of bewildering new plant parents to part with their money in the hopes of giving their plants the best care, when most of it is not really necessary. Personally, I keep it ultra simple with just 2 ingredients: compost and perlite. No bark, no pumice, no tone, just 5 parts compost and 2 parts perlite. This is the perfect mix for keeping your plants hydrated whilst not holding on to too much moisture that would threaten the roots. If you're potting up succulents and cacti, then up the amount of perlite to 3 or 4 parts. This should really be plenty. One of the best things you can do for your plants is to take the advice given on those plant labels in the shops with a pinch of salt. Most of the time, these labels don't even give you the name of the plant, and then go on to give the most generic advice going on guidance for keeping it healthy. The best thing you can do is chuck that label in the bin as soon as you get home, get onto Google, ChatGPT, or your favourite plant YouTuber, and search the care requirements for your new plant. And if the label doesn't have the name of the plant, which is an all too familiar occurrence in garden centres, then take a photo and use Google Lens to help identify it. I mean, how many times have you picked up a plant in IKEA and the label says succulent mix instead of the name of the plant? Not really helpful, is it? I can understand this somewhat for somewhere like IKEA. It's not a dedicated nursery, but it's unforgivable in a specialist garden centre to label a plant green foliage plant instead of Dieffenbachia. This description doesn't give the new owner a prayer on how to keep it alive, let alone help it thrive. There we are, rant over. This is one of my personal bugbears and something I've not mentioned on this channel before, so it's nice to get it finally off my chest. I've posted a few vertical videos on TikTok and YouTube Shorts over the last few months showing some alternative methods to repotting plants. In those videos, I often don't break up the roots. I simply take it out of the pot and place it in its new home, adding soil around, leaving it to do its thing. The feedback is usually, shall we say, unsupportive, telling me I must loosen the roots, otherwise the plant will die. This isn't always necessary. You can save yourself a lot of time and energy by breaking this rule and not breaking up the roots. And in this video here, I explain why, so make sure you click on the link.